All right. So in 2022, I gave a presentation about how COVID had turned everyone here into a reluctant hero. No one wanted to become arguably the most important part of saving U.S. society, because you did. Okay, it won't go full screen if you're in notes me. Yeah, when you're in notes mode. Google's crazy. In any event, I talked about how, and you all remember this, March, April, May 2020, everyone was anxious and upset. And the thing that we heard for a year or two from all of you was, I want things just to go back to normal. And we all said that for a long time, but you noticed that we haven't been saying, I want to go back to normal, not because we don't miss what it was like pre-COVID, but think about how much more capable you are as a human being, as a pediatrician, and as a practice owner than you were before COVID. How many people here had never done a vaccine clinic before COVID? Okay, thank you for raising your hand, because I was expecting more. All right, let's pretend there's like a half a dozen hands had gone up. Maybe, I realized you're the AP class and you were already cool, okay, but usually when I ask that question, a bunch of hands go up. As for the doctors, you've had to do more doctoring and sciencing and thinking about your job you did in 2020, 21, 22 than you've done in my experience doing this. Yes, I realize, things do get updated. There are new ways to deal with whatever. Take your pick. Otitis, and we obviously have this tidal wave of mental health issues. But you were actually reading articles in a way that you hadn't in a long time. And you became a better person for it. You are stronger as practices and doctors. So I gave a talk about that. It was good, because at the end of the talk, David Allen came up to me, and he was the first person to ask me a question. And it was actually the first big talk I'd given post-COVID. And I was like, here we go. And he's like, hey, did you see Dune yet? It was perfect. Hold on, I don't know if I have animations. Yeah. Then, last year, I spoke about the concept of why you are here, what motivates you. And I referred a lot to a book called Drive by Daniel Pink, who talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I brought up Dr. Allen because he mentioned to me a book called Employalty. And what were the terms that he used for his? It was like a destination workplace, perfect job, important work, and great bosses, which are a variation of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Okay? And I talked about how one of the reasons, to me, that you all feel so burned out, it's not because you lack purpose. Your purpose is amazing. You saved the United States. Without pediatricians, kids don't go back to school, parents don't go back to work. Period. I think the works that pediatricians and their staff did, plus first responders and elementary school teachers, they all deserve medals. So purpose isn't the problem. And with all the effort you had to go through, all the extra hard work you had to go through and manage to become a better physician, to become a better boss, all the craziness that you went through during COVID, you also have opportunity for mastery. And mastery is something that really drives physicians a lot. You went through med school. You went through residency. The people in this room are now in a practice. They started a practice. You all know this is all of us right now, right? So mastery isn't your issue. The real issue that you have when it comes to burnout is autonomy. And autonomy, at first, you think, pardon me, well, I'm in independent practice. Brian Birch can get up tomorrow and change the name of his practice, paint it a different color, stop seeing anyone whose name begins with an F. It doesn't matter. He has total autonomy in that way, except, especially the last 2 Octobers, you have not had much control over what happens in your practice. October 22 was the Great Flood. You were busier in October 22 than you'd ever been. Contrast that with just before that, you had the least amount of volume. You had no control over your incoming work. October 23 was also a tidal wave. There was more strep throat, I think, on planet Earth in October 23 than any time in history. When we look at the numbers, strep throat is so far beyond anything we'd ever seen. Thank you very much, Ben. This is when I bend over. Now I'm out of breath. I get out of water. Okay. So I had talked about those 2 things. And a lot of that is a focus on how you feel. And one of the things I want you to think about right now, with being the reluctant hero and having this path forced on you, and not having control over a pandemic, not having the control over your staff, some of whom just don't show up one day. You all have seen that. How do you get back to this important concept, all right? How do you get back to your dream? Everyone here has some kind of dream or vision for what they want to accomplish in their careers. For some people, it's very fully formed. Other people, it's, day to day or week to week. But you had a vision. So when you were, well, here, I'll just do this. I'm going to goof up my slides. I'm going to say you had a vision. I'll speak to the doctors first, because that's easier. But you had a vision when at some point you realized you wanted to be a pediatrician. For some of you, how many people knew they wanted to be a pediatrician in elementary school? Okay. So you had a vision early on of what that looked like. How many people didn't realize it until they did that rotation? Okay. You had a vision, but it changed. And all of a sudden you're like, I have a new vision. Now look at this picture, this Norman Rockwell picture. I want you to think about how crazily inaccurate this picture is today. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Fall risk. No parent. Kid willingly dropping his pants to get a shot. The doctor giving a shot. I also want to say this. One of the big changes that we have in this industry, I've been in it long enough to have seen it myself. That particular doctor is not representative of the pediatric distribution anymore. It was when I started. And just for those guys out there, don't be threatened by this. Embrace the new world because it's awesome. All right, you guys are actually more valuable now. You're unicorns. But I look at this picture, so I used it though because what I want to get to is you had a vision of what your practice was going to look like. I've talked to so many practices, so many people here. PCC has signed 57 startup practices since 2019, some of whom are in this room. And when I talk to them, they have this energy, and I get a little frustrated sometimes because the energy is like, I picked a logo. And I was like, no, I want you to pick an insurance company to get credentialed with. That's what I want you to pick. But they have an excitement and a vision, and there's something they want to accomplish. And as physicians, you've always done well. You got A's in school. You tested well. You got into this school, and then you got into this residency program. Like, you're always winning. But you've had no experience or education on actually owning or running a business. And on average, you suck at it. I gotta remember what my slide is. Before I describe why that is, and why you've been able to get away with it for so long, I want to remind you of something that's really important. That what I want to do is connect the concept of being a pediatric CEO to your dream and your vision, that vision that you had either in 5th grade or in that rotation, or when you actually bought your first practice or opened your first practice or became a partner. I want you to think back to that dream and to that vision, because the only way you are going to live and fulfill that dream is through your own hard work and your own deliberate work. I'm guilty of the same thing that everyone here is, which is every now and then I see an opportunity to watch a seminar or read a book, and I'm like, okay, this book will give me the answers to questions that this will fix it. And your patients do the same thing. They show up in your office in your exam room and they want you to just fix it. Write this script, tell me this one thing, give me this referral to this person, and it will all go away. And I don't think there's anything that works that way except for antibiotics, right? And less every year, as we know. So, no one will make your dream come true except for you. Now, I wanted to make sure hold on, I gotta get back to this guy. So, the reason I am so rude and say that you suck at running a business, besides the fact that it's true, is because that's never been your focus. No one here, I hope, set out to become a multimillionaire through the delivery of pediatric care. There's a long, slow, hard road, okay? You did all have an opportunity to be another specialty. Pretty much every other specialty would have been an easier road. No one here, I suspect, had any business classes in med school. They didn't teach you about coding. They didn't teach you about how to manage people. They didn't teach you how to hire people. They didn't teach you how to fire people. They didn't teach you how to read a P&L, okay? So what other profession can you think of gets absolutely no training or education whatsoever about running a business and then flings itself into opening a business and survives? And the reason you survive is this. The reason you've done okay all these years, but it's a little bit harder every year, is because even you, the lowly pediatricians, still generate $500,000 to $1 million of cash a year, which is a huge amount of money. And what that gave you during Norman Rockwell's era, 1953, that painting, you could suck at running the business because it made so much money, you could make mistakes over and over and over again. I want you to think of your practice and think of how many mistakes you have made running the practice over the years, yet here you are with money in the bank, patients coming to see you. You have this business, it's not bulletproof, but it's got an incredible amount of cash flow. And that keeps, I'm not trying to insult you. Of course you weren't good at it because that's not what you were trained to do. You were trained to focus on kids, and it's such a huge part of your culture. The kids' health comes first, the money comes second. I'm not going to worry about that. However, through no fault of yours or ours, the entire business of medicine has become a business. It is run by organizations that are like organized crime. I have to say that. Or it's my opinion that they are like organized crime. I didn't even say who I was talking about. And so all of these people are coming for you now. When Walmart decides that it wants to give immunizations, they are coming to eat your lunch. And you can't be that guy anymore because Walmart squishes every small town it goes to. So where you could 10 years ago have employees who aren't effective, Have someone you've had for 30 years who only works really 8 hours a week. You could have that person. I've seen hundreds of them because it didn't matter, because you made enough money that you could run inefficiently. But those days, you still can. There's no one in here is perfectly efficient, but it gets harder and harder to not pretend, or pardon me, it gets more and more difficult to pretend you're not a business. Am I making sense so far? You all are like, this is heavy for Friday morning. So, let me talk about this. And I want to see if you can recognize yourself or recognize others in your practice. And this is how the evolution works, or has worked, in my opinion. Everyone in here, physicians, staff alike, has at one point been employed. When you were in residency, you were employed by the hospital. Someone else was in control of you. Someone else made decisions for you. All right, I actually made good notes about this, all right? Hold on. Oh, I did something funny. So when you're an employed clinician or just employee in a practice, most of the time, your focus is on tactical things. Think about everyone here who employs a doctor. Are they really invested usually in the long-term viability of the practice? No. I mean, why should they be? They're interested, their focus is on themselves. Their focus is on their patients when they're in the exam room. And they're very tactical. And I want to be clear, these people have incredible value in your practice. I'm not suggesting that everyone here move away from being employed or having an employed mindset. You don't necessarily want that. Or certainly it works well when you are the employer. But this is the base. This is where everyone starts. This is where you come in and say, pardon me, how can I maximize my paycheck? How can I work fewer hours for the same amount of money? You're very self-interested. There's another layer, though, and that it describes a lot of people in this room, and that's the owner layer. Now, the owner is moving a little bit towards some strategic thinking. They now realize, okay, I'm responsible for some things. I might make money if the business goes well, above and beyond what I produced myself. However, as you know, a lot of owners still don't think beyond their own circle. I'm one of 20 partners, I'm one of 10 partners, and you have some people who are just owners. All they do is collect their profit. You have other owners who, of course, are very collaborative and think about the practice. But this is where probably most of the people in the room are. And for 50 years, you could survive as an owner of a business because a full-time pediatrician who does 3,500 visits in most places will generate $650,000. That's why. A florist doesn't generate $650,000. The muffler guy, he doesn't generate $650,000. Very few lawyers generate $650,000. So, there's an owner. And then last but not least, you have the CEO brain. And the CEO brain is the one that has a holistic view of everything that happens in the practice. This is not a clinician. I'm not suggesting that you have to stop seeing patients at all. That's not what I'm talking about. But these are two hats that you wear. You take when you're in an exam room and you're seeing a patient, you have your doctor hat on. But when you walk out of that room, all right, and right now, right, when you walk out of that room and four of your staff are in line to ask you questions. What about this? How do that? All right, that's your owner / CEO hat. But a true CEO has a vision. In fact, This is a Katrina Skinner term. You are the chief visionary officer. You have to constantly repeat the vision for what everyone is trying to accomplish. And you know, I can stand up here and talk for 2 hours about mission, vision, values. I did that on Wednesday morning for 10 minutes, all right? That is your fundamental role. You're in charge of the final output and product of your business. And one of the things that's very, very difficult for pediatricians to do is think like business owners, because it feels uncomfortable, it feels greedy, it feels like that's not what you went to school to do. But I'm up here to beg you to start thinking like that, not because you're greedy, but because I need your practices to stay viable and stay independent. You provide better, less expensive care than any other part of the healthcare spectrum. You provide the most important care. And with your practices being gobbled up by PE or the hospital, and where you really lose autonomy and you really lose purpose, if you want to get burned out, go work for the man. All right? So what else do I want to tell you about the CEO? All right, let's think about I want you to think about the difference. I've sort of done some shorthand up here, the difference between the employee brain, the owner brain, and the CEO brain. Can an employee recite the mission, vision, and values? No. Not unless you make them. And do they embody it? Do they feel it? Not usually. They can, don't get me wrong. If you as a CEO are running a practice really well, your employees can do that. But the employee brain is not interested in the practice. Now, an owner, you might get to pick one. Oh, I know our mission. I was on the committee that did our values, so I think I know a couple of them. I mean, if I ask you right now in this room, how many people can in fact recite their practice's mission and vision and values? The rest of you are owners in this way. And then the CEO brain has it tattooed on her brain. She sees it every day. She might even make a neon sign in the office that recites it for everyone right there. All right? You get up and you breathe, and you breathe out. I can't use breathe up here. You get up and wheeze. You breathe the elements of your values. Okay? So what else do we know? How does an employee think, tactically or strategically? An employee thinks entirely tactically. What's happening in my next exam room? What do I need to do to prepare for this weekend? When is my vacation? How am I going to deal with this well visit? Okay. An owner is mostly tactical, but also personally strategic a little bit. What I mean by that is when the owners start thinking about stuff, well, you know what, I want to retire in 3 or 4 years. So I got to make sure we have enough money in the business so I can get a payout. That's what an owner would think about. And then a CEO certainly has a lot of tactical duties, but the fewer the better, because you've delegated. But you have a personal strategy and a practice strategy. You always know what you're going to be doing over the next 1, 3, 5 years, or you have a plan for it. No one knew in February 2020 that we were going to be doing in March, but you should have had a plan. This is what it's going to look. This is my goal, and that's what a CEO does. How about expanding the performance and impact of the practice? If you want to make more money, the employed doctor says, I need to add patients. I need to see more patients, work more hours, fit more kids in, because I have a productivity bonus. The owner says, hey, if I want to make more money, I'm going to add more employed clinicians. The CEO says, I'm going to find the right people for the right job in my business, and I'm going to delegate so that I'm operating at my highest level, and the people who work for me are operating at their highest level. All right? And it's not simply about chasing money. It's in fact, just to Dr. Allen was pointing out with employalty, you are creating a business where people want to work. So how about improving the practice? You have an idea for making the practice better. Well, the employees do it to help themselves. I want to improve the practice to make my day-to-day job better, easier. The owners want to improve the practice just to maintain the money train. And if you're like, well, what do you mean exactly? How many people here, don't raise your hand if you're sitting next to this person, have a partner who refuses to make a capital investment in the practice because they're not going to get to earn the benefit of it? Thank you. All right. Oh, I don't want to open another practice. Why am I going to open another practice? Why are we going to spend all this money on carpets? You know, it's someone who's retiring in 2 years, and just, that's an owner. It's not a CEO. And what does the CEO do? The CEO improves the practice for the employees, for the community, and for long-term viability. It's a different vision. It's not shockingly different. This isn't rocket science or some crazy scheme, but you back up and say, all right, what does this entire practice and all the people who are employed here, what do they need for us to keep serving the kids in our community? Let's look at another one of these. When presented with an opportunity, the employee says, why? Why do we want to do that? Oh, we're gonna do a flu clinic and we're gonna offer donuts. Why? What's in it for me? You know, the owner is often, well, let me tell you why not. Let me tell you why this isn't gonna work. Let me say no. This is gonna cost money. And the CEO doesn't say, let me tell you why not. They say, hey, why not? And who is gonna do it? Who am I gonna find to help me do this thing? How do people plan? The employee plans for the next vacation. The owners plan for the next distribution. And the CEO has a 1, 3, 10-year vision. 10-year-old vision. A 10-year vision. Their mindset, the employee asks first and foremost, how does this affect me? The owner, I'm just realizing I left a note out of this. Anyway, the owners often approach things with a scarcity mindset, or a no-but mindset, or a conservative, let's make as few changes as possible mindset. Whereas a CEO approaches it with a mindset of abundance. How can we do this? Look at this opportunity that we have to see more kids, to open another location. And I'm not advocating for acting like a crazy person without plans. Just keep in mind, you see there's a 1, 3, 10-year vision. I'm saying you do it with plans. But you have a growth mindset. And it doesn't mean you're going to try to execute world domination and do every practice in your county. That's not that kind of growth necessarily. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, my 10-year vision is that I'm going to remain a solo practice in charge of my space. I'm going to have 1,200 patients. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to constantly look at the things that are coming, being thrown at you, so you have a plan to maintain that viability. What's the delegation strategy? For an employee, it's to avoid any extra work, especially any extra work that doesn't involve getting paid more. You all have these employees. For an owner wants to avoid certain work. You know what? I hate HR, so I'm going to put the nurse manager in charge of HR. I'm going to make one of the MAs clean up the puke from that kid in room 3, or whatever. They avoid certain work because they're the boss. They get to pick the things that they want to do. A CEO provides opportunity, expands capacity, and improves results. Is any of this making sense? I know it's Friday, everyone's dancing. You look at me all very nicely. I mean, people aren't frowning. I just want to make sure I'm not crazy. All right. Thank you. Seriously, we should have had little oxygen tanks as a giveaway. So So last on this list, how do these different brains react to a meteorite? A meteorite being COVID, a meteorite being Change Healthcare debacle, okay? The employee has only a personal plan. What's in it for me? How do I survive this meteorite? The owner's meteorite is the operating agreement. When I signed to this partnership, what can and what can I not do? The CEO has multiple plan Bs, has a succession plan. That's the difference. Jesse, I didn't get to go to your class on succession planning, unfortunately. Well, yes, it was. And I have heard variations of it before. But standing up here, I can tell you one of the most important things you can do in your practice right now is have a succession plan, a very clear one. What happens if this person gets abducted by an alien, or this person gets abducted by an alien, or this person gets... and what happens if we lose this? And what happens if everything goes the way we plan it for our 1, 3, 5-year, 10-year plans? Who's going to take over for me when I get tired? It's so fundamental. That's what other businesses do. And because for 50 years, you did not have to learn to run a business because you made so much money, even though it didn't feel like it, you could make mistakes. I've witnessed so many practices, and you know them yourselves, who got to the end of the train are like, oh no, I don't know what to do now. I know great practices that just closed. I know great practices who lost a key provider and drifted away. I know practices who sold to the hospital for pennies, and now everyone is sad. So not having a succession plan, in a way, to me, is the most exemplary. Exemplary is totally the wrong word. It's the best example of a lack of CEO thinking, because that's what a CEO does. It's not doctor thinking. Now, it just so happens I'm preaching to a room full of people who understand preventive care, okay? And look at how much of this concept is involved with preventive care, and you don't apply those concepts to your own business. So, before I talk about this next part, I just want everyone here, if 1 or 2 takeaways from this talk today, one of them would be, please, I need to create my succession plan. I need to start talking about it and thinking about it, no matter how simple it is. And here are 2 elements of it. You have a personal succession plan, what you want to accomplish for yourself, and you need to have a succession plan for your office. And if you have partners, get all on the same page right now about what that succession plan looks like. All right, so because here, I believe I have some fun. What do you do when the evolutionary pyramid is broken? All right. What do you do when you have an owner who acts like an employed doctor? That's the worst case scenario, just about. You have someone who's an owner, but exhibits all or mostly the behavior of an employed clinician. They think only about themselves. They have no plan other than their own. They are not looking long term. They don't have a succession plan for anyone but themselves, maybe. That when you have an owner who's acting like an employed clinician, that is actually one of the hardest things I deal with when I do consulting. I'll be in a room and there are 5 people, and there's someone who just wants to collect the margin from the other doctors. That's what being an owner means. I've been working with some practices lately where, it's in a part of the country that's got a lot of really nice universities, and all of the doctors in these practices have all graduated from Ivy League schools, let's just say. And each one of them, because of the way they were brought up and the way they work, they just assume, naturally, they keep climbing the ladder. That's the only thing they know, okay? Well, you got perfect SAT scores, and you went to Harvard, and you were the first in your class at this, and you're the chief resident, and then now you're in the practice. Of course you're going to be the owner of the practice. But they have no concept whatsoever of what that means. They're just climbing a ladder. They just only know the next step. And they're not actually backing out and saying, what does it mean to own this practice? Because owning this practice means you lose sleep at night. You're the one who unplugs the toilet or goes into when the vaccine fridge sends out a text at 3 a.m. You're the one who has to deal with crying employees, and you're the one who has to fire them. And those are all things that a lot of owners don't like to do. How about when you have a CEO who acts only like an owner? This is, when I asked earlier, and I identified, when I said, how many people in this room can recite their mission, vision, and values, and only a few hands went up, I am telling you that if you are an owner of your practice and you don't know your mission, vision, and values, or you don't have them, you are like an absentee landlord in your own business. Yes, you're there seeing kids. Yes, you are generating revenue, and you are generating revenue at such a high rate, you don't actually have to run your business. But that is not sustainable. At some point, you are going to have more pain than you want because you didn't have a plan. You didn't have a 1, 3, 5-year, 10-year plan. You didn't have a set of vision and values. You didn't communicate. You weren't the chief visionary officer. You aren't getting everyone on the same page. You're not delivering on your culture. How can you possibly be delivering on your culture as the owner of your practice if you don't know what your mission, vision, and values are? I realize this is why Bloom Pediatrics makes a video about Chip yelling at them. All right, I'm sorry about that. But I'm not yelling at you, you know that. I want you to succeed. This is what I'm doing to you right now is what you do 10 to 15 times a day in an exam room, all right, when you're trying to get a parent to pay attention to something that will have an effect downstream if they don't do it now. So I want you to think about who you are and what role you play in your practice, okay? And I want to come back to this. Am I going to end early? Probably. I don't see a clock in here, but it doesn't matter. One of the most important things you can do as the CEO is to invest in your own practice. There is no better investment that the people in this room can make. If you've got $100,000, all right, yes, okay, if you knew for sure, okay, that, I don't know, NVIDIA was going to go up 1,000,000% 5 years ago, that is a pretty good investment for $100,000. Okay, you could have, if you'd invested in NVIDIA 5, 10 years ago, you could have hosted the conference yourself, all right, a couple times. But besides those lucky strikes, the best investment you can make in this room is actually in yourself. The return that you will get on the time and the money from attending an event like this, going to certain classes and hearing something that changes your practice, understanding coding better, learning to be a better leader, those investments have a huge payoff. I'm preaching to the choir on this. You're all standing in front of me having made a significant investment to be here. Some of you didn't get to see patients for a couple of days, and some of you are like, yes, that's why I came, but still, there's revenue. There's revenue that you didn't get from that. It's not, you flew here, there's a hotel. But the investment you can make in yourself is the most important investment you can make. It's got the biggest return. Let me ask, did anyone here have to get permission from their partners to come to this? Okay. That's part of what I'm talking about. You own a business. And my presumption is attending an event like this is an investment in the business. Yet you have to, and I realize why it happens, okay? But if it's not understood by the partners that something like this is something that everybody should be going to, not just you. And if and I ask that question because I've worked with. I remember at one of an early users conference, we had an office manager. This practice is long gone. They imploded with a hospital deal. But they had an office manager who was really like tied into PCC, and they were trying to turn her into the billing manager. I don't remember all the stuff, but she really, really, really wanted to go to the users conference and learn. They wouldn't send her. So she bought her own ticket, came to the users conference, absorbed it all, and when she got home, they let her go. And I was like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. When you have an employee who is dying to get better at their jobs, what is your job as CEO? Let them, support them, help them make that happen. I'll just say, oh, here's my water, sorry. Now, the biggest self-investment I want you to make, I've probably given you 3 big self-investment things. I already said, work on your succession plan. But the other thing I want you to do is go all the way back to that slide where you had a dream as a kid about being the practice you wanted to be. And one of the things I want you to do is I want you to think about that dream. Think about it right now for a moment. What made you excited to be a pediatrician? What was the thrilling thing that you enjoyed about it? And you're not going to get there today. In fact, it's something you're always going to chase. You're never going to wake up. It's really rare that you wake up in the middle of your own living dream and being like, right now is perfection. You'll look back and be like, last week was perfection. I didn't realize it, but last week was perfection because it kind of sucks right now. I wish I could go back a week. But think about that dream and move one step closer to it. Write your dream down. We gave you a book. Write your dream down. What do I want to be when I grow up? And start planning to move in that direction. Now, I could give you a list of 20 books to use to help guide you to do this. And they're all different variations. They're all like different religions, okay? They're all valid. I'm not going to direct you to one because I want it to be the one that matches you. I've been using the Traction series a lot from Entrepreneurial Operating Systems, EOS, Traction, and there's a new one out, People, like Dare to Build a Conscious Culture. But they don't necessarily have to work for you. There are others. But whatever you do, define your dream, define your mission, vision, and values, and take a step towards it. You're the only one who can do it. No one else can do it for you. So when tomorrow you're frustrated when you get back to work, or Monday, I want you to think about this class and say, who is the only person who can solve this problem in my practice? And if you're the owner of the practice, put your CEO hat on. Stop being a pediatrician for a moment. Stop being a doctor for a moment. Stop being the empathy machine you are that sees all the sides of everything. And you feel bad for your employees and your patients. Stop doing all that and say, all right, I own a business, and I need to make sure that this business is the best place for people to work. And move in that direction. So, how early am I, guys? Can you tell me back there? 9:28. So I'm 10 minutes early. It's all right. That felt like an hour and a half, though, didn't it? I'm sorry. Does anyone have any questions? They took the mics away because I said there aren't going to be any questions. But you yell them at me, and I will repeat them. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts about this? Right here, please. Mm-hmm. Sure. It's a great question. So can I expand on the concept of delegation from the CEO brain perspective? I think one of the hardest tasks for you to do as clinicians is to delegate, because you are all control freaks. And you often control things that you're not even necessarily good at. I mean, look, PCC is employed. We do a lot of support because you guys do dumb things like all the time, all right? That is a fact. So, thank you, Brian. There are mics now. So when it comes to delegation, broadly speaking, the first place to start is with the philosophy that you want everyone in your practice, from the 3-hour-a-week part-time high school kid to you as the CEO, operating at the highest level of your skill. When you as an owner have to, I'm trying to think of, there are a lot of good examples. I'm trying to not to be wholly cliched. But when you as an owner are trying to, when you're an owner and you have a fight among some of the employees, the nurses are arguing about something, and you're not trained in HR, you're just a person with a medical degree, and you come in and try to fix it, you may not be particularly good at it. In fact, you're usually not, yeah, right? You're not HR, you're not trained in it. So in an ideal circumstance, and not everyone here can go hire an HR department or a person, but there are people who are trained in HR. I can pick any segment. Let's be clear. All the physicians in here do delegation. You have staff. There isn't anyone in here who checks the patients in, gives the shots, is the doctor, then bills the insurance company. You have people do those different duties. At some of the things that you want to do as a CEO start to get pretty sophisticated. All right? Yes, most of you at this point have stopped designing your own websites, okay? There was a time when you did. But you delegate that. And the more you can delegate your work, an example might be to use scribes so that you can free up your time to operate at your highest level. As a physician, to see more patients. As the CEO, to do more work, building and expanding the impact of my practice. I'm being deliberately mildly vague because Katrina Skinner has an entire class on this, and I'm 99% sure you can take Katrina Skinner delegation and you can watch a video or listen to the video or look at her slides about this topic. So delegation is the sign of an effective CEO brain. So if anyone else has a question, please come on up to one of the mics, or you can leave quietly like it's church. Please.
Do you have suggestions of how to, in a group of multiple owners, like how do you navigate? There's 7, and CEO in my mind thinks there's 1, but we don't really function that way. Like, do you have suggestions of how to have all of us move towards CEO, but then we have different opinions, and so it gets
I have
muddy.
2 suggestions. Number 1, broadly speaking, no matter what recipe book I suggest next, the biggest single thing you can do, and do it constantly and consistently, is to actually sit down together and talk about things. Most of you have all partners in you, and for you to have a partner meeting more than once a year that everyone dreads is unique. Or, a couple practices, maybe you do them quarterly and then you're handing out financials, but you're not really having a partner meeting to sit and talk about strategic elements. You have to force yourself, no matter what, to sit down and talk about these things. However, I will say the Traction series has very, very specific guidance about how to address exactly what you're talking about. All right, where you go through and I'm giving you a very poor summary, but you look at what it takes to run the business. These positions need to exist. You're not thinking about who's doing anything right now. These positions need to exist, and someone needs to be what they call the visionary, and someone needs to be the implementer. And when I say someone, I mean someone, okay? And it's not 3 people are the visionaries, okay? And you then go back and have some very, very tough discussions, and they walk you through how to do that, about who sits in those roles. And you're right. If you've been operating without any sort of understanding about who's in charge for 15 years, If you have some partners who are glad to be owners, and what I mean by that is they want status quo, you're going to have a tough time. But if you have a vision for how you want the practice to be, you either have to negotiate with them how they're going to let you drive the vision, or you have to work somewhere else, or be sad. Those are the only options I know. And I'm not up here trying to confront you with reality, but a lot of you have partners who make you sad, and they will never wake up and stop making you sad. So all you can do is talk about it and figure out a path. Hope that they might allow you to drive the vision, or you'll have to create a vision without them. But take a look at Traction by Gino Wickman. That's the one book I'd recommend right now. Please.
So this question isn't for me, but I had a meal with a practice who's here, where a bunch of their staff are here, really devoted, really caring about the practice and the kids and everything else, but they can't get their physicians to come to hear PMI. They can't even get them, I would say, maybe even out of the employed mentality. What can a practice like that do that has the right people in the right seats on the non-physician side to try to get the physicians to step up?
That's a great question, especially because I can think of, there's more than one practice here in that space. First of all, it's a shame because those doctors have no idea how lucky they are. And they are the perfect example of what I was talking about. They make enough money and they've got other people taking care of them. They don't have to think like CEOs. And they're not going to until something bad happens. That's been my experience. I suppose it's possible if someone among the employees is dynamic and strong enough and secure enough in his or her position, they could work hard to get the doctors to start working that way. I do know practices that where the practice manager is the CEO brain of the practice. All right, that was Lynn Kramer, for those of you who remember her. And that's perfectly possible, but that requires a certain amount of energy and drive and vision that's a heavy pull for a lot of people, especially when it's not your business. Lynn Kramer, for those of you who remember her, she was just a practice manager, but she was one of the most dynamic and effective people I've ever met in my life, and her bosses eventually realized it and made her a partner in the business. Because they're like, oh, this woman has been making us money in a way that we can't afford to lose her. They had enough of vision and understanding. But as you know, doctors are incredibly short-sighted and reluctant to think that way because they just think about being owners. I feel bad for that practice, but I don't have a solution for it other than just know whoever you are, and it's like so many of you. Maybe you could put something. Maybe you can send them this slide deck. Maybe you can cut out a section of the slide deck and show them the picture with the CEO upside down at the bottom, and say, hey, I just found this piece of paper. Leave on your desk. Any other questions, please? So this is I don't know, the third or fourth time I've given this talk. Go ahead, but I need to run it. I need to have it end on a better note. You're feeling sad right now. Don't feel sad. You're doing fine.
Okay, this might be happier. What if you have two CEO brains, but maybe they don't always see eye to eye, but they're both owners?
You can't run a business with two CEO brains. That's why in the Traction book, they actually are very direct that only one person can be the visionary and one person can be the integrator, sorry. That's what they call the person. There's someone who gets stuff done. There's someone who makes things happen, and there's someone and it's really someone who does tactical work and someone who does strategic work. And what you may actually have when you have those two people, you may actually have two people who are vying for control of the company, but what they're doing is they're fighting over it as opposed to saying, oh, well, why don't you do this part and I'll do that part? And that's another example where I would very much recommend looking at the traction book, because it's very explicit, one person for that job. Yeah. Can anyone here name a successful Fortune 500 company that has 2 CEOs? And the answer is no. Okay. All right, does anyone else have a question? If not, we have a 10-minute break before the next class. Thank you very much.